All right, students, welcome. This is going to be a demonstration on how to produce your Macbeth cards, Macbeth note and source cards for the second assignment after the synonym card. So the first card that you're going to produce is called the source card, and that's this first one here. I'd like you to put your name and the date, the heading, everything should be handwritten. Okay. The things that you really want to pay attention to and make sure that um, you do is underlining is key. That's where you're gonna either uh, unfortunately lose points if you don't do that. Okay, so make sure that it's very clear that you can see the underline under Macbeth because it's a play. Okay, what this is here is called a topic, a subtopic. All right. For other sources, you're going to have magazine article, newspaper article, Bible, poem. Okay, so Macbeth is the source, but it's also the name of the work that you're working with. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing. The next thing is going to be Shakespeare, comma William, Macbeth, and that too is going to be underlined. So make sure that that is visible in your notability. Okay. The next thing is the open source Shakespeare, which is the source of the PDF that we used. That is also underlined. And the name of the source, okay, is www.opensourceshakespeare.org. A lot of this is repetitive, but it's just the proper format. And then also include that it was a PDF, right? So just a word about source cards and note cards in general. Macbeth is going to be your first source. Okay, so that's why we have the number one here. All right, and anything that comes from this source, Macbeth source, is also going to be named number one. So we look at just a quick um, overview of the next cards. All right, there's number one here, and there's number one here, and a number one here. All of these contain the number one. Okay, so since we're doing these virtually, okay, what we had done in the past when you saw the teachers walking around with shoe boxes full of index cards, this is what was in them um, for the most part, or they had a pair of shoes. Now, the source card, the first card for any of your sources, but we're going to focus on Macbeth. All right, it's going to be the line side. The next card that you're going to produce is what's called. So let's name this. All right. You don't have to write this on your card. Anything that's written here is what you should have on your cards. All right. And this is called a source card. The next card, okay, which is what you're going to write. All right. You're going to simulate. This is the front of the card, and this is the back of the card. Right. This one right here is the back of the card. What we had done with this is you're still going to have your subtopic Macbeth. All right. You're going to have the number one. Okay, we did that before, and you're going to have your word in context in Macbeth. Okay, and a good. How much should I take from Macbeth? A good guideline to follow is period to period. But keep in mind, what you want to do with these source cards is you want to give yourself the um, opportunity not to go back to the original source. So we won't say necessarily more is better because I think it's always better to put less on each card um, than more cards and more on each card but fewer cards. Okay, so what this student did was writes that Shakespeare writes, "False face must hide what the false heart doth know." All right, I believe his word was false. Okay, so it's there twice. That's a really good quote. All right, what we want to indicate on this card is that it is a direct quote. Okay, that will, when we are using these cards for later purposes, we know that it's a direct card, and of course it's proper format. Okay, it comes from Macbeth, all right, and that again too is underlined, and it comes from the first act, scene 7, and these are the line numbers. Okay, that is the line number, all right, and that's where it comes from. So when you go to document this in the paper, all right, you know where that quote comes from when you list it, if that's the one that you're going to use. All right. So after the direct card is used, what you're going to do is produce a paraphrase card. All right, you're going to paraphrase or make the explanation. I like the way the student does this. Make the explanation that in Act 1, Scene 1, Macbeth concludes the act by saying, "False face, hide what the false heart doth know," and says it to Lady Macbeth. In this line, Macbeth is saying how he must put on a fake appearance to hide his untrue heart, as he has decided to kill the king. False is used to describe Macbeth as having an untruthful appearance and heart. False means untrue in this quote. Okay, so that was a good job by the student to fully explore what was being spoken about and how false is used and what it means there. Okay, now this second quote, and I do want to go back and just look at what kind of quote this is. All right, this is called it's a non-block format. Okay, which means that it's fewer than 4 lines of verse. With this next direct quote, right? This next direct quote is more than 3 lines of verse. Okay, and what this student does is he retains the format of the original work. Okay, in a block quote. Okay, so this next one just happens to be a block quote. All right, and then going from period to period, block quote, all right, for verse, okay, is 4 plus lines. Okay, 4 plus lines of verse. And verse means poetry, song lyrics, anything like that, anything that's not prose, like a short story or a novel. Okay, so he starts off his quote with Shakespeare writes, okay, and you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of verse here. And what he needs to do, and he does it well, is retains the format of the original work. Okay, you can see that number 1 there, that comes from the first source. It's a direct quote. All right, and this one's different, all right, because it has to be, because it's more than just 1 line. All right, he still has, all right, the direct quote. It's Macbeth, okay, underline because it's the title, and it comes from Act 2, Scene 1, and these are the line numbers 615 through 618. All right, that's properly done, uh, properly composed, direct quote for a block quote. Okay, you don't have to have block quotes. It's just a matter of circumstance if you have a block quote. But going from period to period, and also, choosing the quote that contains your word from Macbeth that you like the best, that coordinates with your other sources, your 3 other sources, right? So that's why you do 3. That's why you do 4 instances of the word that you have in this student's case, false. All right, so this next one will be the back of the card, and in what we did before, all right, he explains it, and these are in your own words. In Act 2, Scene 1, Macbeth says this quote in his famous dagger soliloquy. All right, gives us some reference. Macbeth is seeing a vision of a dagger. And wonders if it's real or false. He questions his state of mind in this quote. False refers to the fake, imaginary image of the dagger. See, that's different than false or untrue. All right, this is imaginary, okay, or fake. that way. All right, and it's a paraphrase of the original. Okay, and it repeats the same documentation. All right, just to be clear about where it comes from. Now with this electronic um, electronic composition of the cards, it's going to be difficult to separate, all right, one from the other. Um, you're not going to lose the cards or anything like that. Or previously, what was done with the cards was that you lay them out and you choose which ones that you would um, choose to use for your paper. Okay, so just so you know that this goes along with that, but you know that because this documentation, this parenthetical citation, matches this one here. Okay, good. All right, and then just continuing with what we've done before. All right, we got the subtopic. We got Shakespeare writes, and then this quote about ambition. All right, starts with ambition. All right, and the word false. All right, play false is used. It's a direct quote. Macbeth, act, scene, line numbers. It's a block quote because you would count 63, 64, 65, 66. All right, that's 4 lines. Okay, so that would be a block quote. He goes and explains it. Act 1, Scene 5, Lady Macbeth says this in response to Macbeth's letter about the initial prophecies from the witches. Essentially, Lady Macbeth is lamenting about how Macbeth's righteousness will overcome his ambition. False is used to describe traitorous. Traitorous, deceptive behavior like regicide. False means untrue in this quote. All right, so we have a couple that mean untrue. Like I said, sometimes your Macbeth source is going to drive what sources you look for. Certainly, this student had the opportunity to look for untrue rather than that other one about imaginary with the dagger. All right, this is another good example to show you because it provides a different format in the direct quotes. Okay. This is another direct quote. All right, Shakespeare, we've got the subtopic, Macbeth. Shakespeare writes, I grant him bloody, luxurious, avaricious, false, deceitful, sudden, malicious, smoking of every sin, or smacking of every sin, rather. All right, and this is a non-block quote. Okay, now this only happens in prose or, I'm sorry, this only happens in verse and which counts as poetry. Certainly, Shakespearean play qualifies as poetry. All right, this is to indicate the end of the line of each line. Okay, um, so in its original format, um, the word bloody would be the end of the line, then luxurious would be the next beginning of the next line, right? So on and so forth. Okay, so that's a good. We didn't see that in the first one because there was only one line. All right, this one has 3 lines. Okay, and the student goes from period to period. Okay, and following format, it's a direct quote. It comes from Macbeth, Act 4, Scene 3, and the line numbers 110 to 112. All right, those are 3 lines. And then let's go see what it means in context. All right, he writes a good amount here in his own words. In Act 4, Scene 3, Malcolm says this quote to describe Macbeth. By now, Macbeth is a known tyrant, and Malcolm is leading an anti-Macbeth faction to England to retake his throne. Malcolm is describing evils to Macbeth's conversation with Macbeth. One of these evils is false. It might be used to mean 2 things. First, Macbeth's claim to be the throne is false, and Macbeth might suspect he killed Duncan. Second, Macbeth is deceptive and a fraud in general, as rumors about Banquo's death spread. In either case, it means fraudulent. Okay, so that's good. We have a nice, um, we have a nice variety to choose from, whatever it means. Um, so that would be the way to do the Macbeth cards. Okay, find it 4 times, and or at least a synonym of the original, and explore it, because you're writing the paper as you're going along. Right.